Welcome back to From the Burbs to the Tetons. So I've got a whole bunch of little things going on. None of them are really worth their own video, so I thought I'd do a channel update. I'm gonna start leaning toward doing one of those, one about every quarter, because there's just stuff piles up that, like I said, doesn't need a whole video on its own. So one of the top priorities that I'm about to shift into is finishing up a few little details on the design. Once I have those details done, I can then start working on the build, loan, permits, that kind of stuff. I thought, or at least I had attempted in the fall, to try and get all of that stuff done, and there just wasn't time. I finally realized I just wasn't going to be able to get it done because I was hoping to get cement in the ground. I'm going to have to do the footers and the stem walls this spring. Kind of throws a wrench into what I had hoped would be the schedule. I'll have to be a little bit more focused and make sure that I get everything closed in by October. I really need to get it closed in before winter hits. More than happy to work on the inside for however long it takes before we can get our occupancy permit. Now, one of the things that I was hoping to do this late winter, early spring, while there's still snow on the ground out in Idaho, was to go ahead and finish my NuDura ICF training. That's the ICFs are styrofoam blocks that you use to hold cement and they stay in place. You use those instead of regular forms. I really think they're the wave of the future as far as when you want to do a passive house, and they're a no-brainer for doing it, underground things like basements and foundation walls. So I've done the class training. I need to do the field training, which is work on 2 job sites and get the work reviewed to make sure that I actually, the schooling stuff in the classroom took hold. So, that's something that's on my plate. Now, I've thought about this, and I thought, well, the channel really isn't about this, but I'm going to do it anyways. My kids, the older one has purchased a house recently. The younger one is looking to purchase a house, and neither one of them know much about, just regular maintenance stuff on houses. So I'm going to do a short series on that. There'll probably only be about 10 or so videos. But I think it's important to go through that stuff and educate people who are buying houses but don't know anything about the regular maintenance that they need to keep up. I'm going to continue doing DIY stuff. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I've left for this place I'm living in right now. So there'll be 4 or 5 or 6 DIY videos coming while I'm working on the other stuff to head out to Idaho. I'm a Linux person. I'm sure most of you run Windows, and there's probably a few Mac people out there too, and I'm way in the minority of running Linux. Well, when I put my last Linux box together, I always buy really, really high on the hardware side, bleeding edge technology, because the technology changes so much, and I try and keep these machines for about 5 years before I recycle the innards. And I bought what's called a Threadripper AMD chip, and Linux didn't have normal support for it. It treated it like any other Intel chip or AMD chip, which meant that I just spent quite a bit of money on a really sophisticated, fast processor that I wasn't getting anything out of it because the operating system has to recognize it to use the functionality appropriately. Well, Linux has what they call a long-term support version, and they release that about every 2 to 3 years, and that's the one I'd say people who are running Linux on the desktop, they use that one 90% of the time, probably 85% at least. And then you've got the rest of us who use the bleeding edge stuff. Now, normally I would not use the bleeding edge stuff unless I needed to, and in this case, I absolutely positively needed to, because the kernel that came out after the last version of Linux, the long support one, was the one that had the built-in kernel with all the extra goodness for my Threadripper chip. Now the chip runs 32 processes at one time, and they're real processes versus threads. You know, the way Intel works is they take a processor and it's like, well, the processor is probably going to be idle most of the time, so we're going to make it look like 4 processors even though it's 1. And they have 4 threads. I'd have to go way deep in on the technical stuff with the Threadripper. It's really amazing technology. But I've got 32 processors that are more like a real processor than threads. The other thing is that the memory channel is the same memory channel throughout all of it. So when you have things running, they can go across the processors that are in there much, much faster. So I've got 16 cores, 32, I'm going to call them threads because there's no other good definition for them, and a huge memory bus, and I also have 64 gigabytes of RAM. The product that I use to edit my videos is Lightsource or Lighthouse. Well, I'll put a link to it below. So if you're interested in it and you're somebody who does video editing, you can take a look at it. It's really a good product. I really like it. They're coming out with a new version that supports the next version of Linux. I'm on 18.10, so the long support version is 18.4. They came out with an 18.10, and they're just about to come out with a 19.10. And I'm running Ubuntu. With Ubuntu, it seems that the long support ones are always a .4. So I expect a 20.4 to eventually come out and be the next long-term support. In the meantime, I want to get on 19.10 because 18.10 no longer gets new updates. I've been running 18.10 now for about 6 months on the same version. I think late July, August, they stopped putting out updates for it. So that's a pretty big thing to upgrade the kernel and all that kind of stuff. There's a certain amount of risk to it, so I've been trying to get ready for that and mitigate it. So if something does go wrong, I can, fix it and get things back up and running fairly quickly. A couple other things. I need to go ahead and get my contracting business opened. I was going to open it here to do some work and stuff because I was kind of told that there's plenty of work to do here, and there probably is if I went out on my own. After talking over with my wife, it's like doing all the marketing and setting up all the stuff so I can get a month's worth of work just didn't seem like it was worth it. So I've been kind of like working on other stuff. So one of the things I've been doing is a lot of research on sealing the envelope between the foundation and the seal plate. I think I've got that worked out how I'm going to do it, and I'll go over that in a video at some point. But I also have some things that I need to figure out at the roof line, the same issues, and the roof itself. So I'm very close to making a decision on that as well. So that's been taking up my time. What I wanted to be able to do is get everything set up so that when I do get out to Idaho, I'm ready to start doing, my contracting work out there legally, licensed and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to work on that stuff too. The other thing I'm going to work on is that I'm going to put a short video together of like the 5 things you should be doing around the house to help you out with the coronavirus. They're really simple things that people just don't think about that would really make a big difference. And they're simple, easy, just kind of like, daggone it, I didn't even think of that. That's so obvious, but until somebody pointed it out to me, it didn't make sense that I should be doing that. So go ahead and look for that update on the coronavirus. It'll be coming out in just a day or two. And see you next time. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe and come along for the ride. And see you on the next video.